Welcome back, everyone. Today I have 5 more books I think all men should own. This is a follow-up video to a video I think I made about a week ago. Did pretty well. Thank you guys for watching that. And today I have 5 more books I think you guys should all have on your bookshelf. I target this video for men because 98% of the people watching my videos are men. Men need the biggest push to go buy books. It's mostly women statistically who are buying books and reading books. So thought I'd make another video on a few more books I think all you guys should go out there and get. Yeah, let's get into it. Number 1, I have a book that is quite heavy. It's not too long. I think it's only 160 pages, so you should be able to rip through it pretty quick. But like I said, it is very heavy. It's a book that was recommended to me when I was working, I think, my second job. I was working at Dairy Queen when I was like 14, and I was very interested in psychology at the time. And a Ukrainian guy who I worked with actually gave me this book recommendation. I went home, I read it, crushed me, and it got me into reading these kinds of books. And I'm talking about Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This is a book that details the experiences of a man, Viktor Frankl, and his experiences in a concentration camp during Nazi Germany. And yeah, it's a very, very heavy book. It details out how you can find meaning in hell, in the worst possible situations, even in a concentration camp where women, children are dying around you, where your family has been ripped away from you and you don't know if they're alive or dead. Even in a situation like that where you're struggling to get breadcrumbs to eat, you can find meaning. And that's very, very inspiring, because we're all going through horrible things in our lives to different degrees, and to hear about the most horrible things to happen to people and how people still find ways to live life is it's very inspiring, and it's important for everybody to read a book like this. And it opens up some doors, like this year I read The Gulag Archipelago, and that was absolutely crushing. It's 2,100 pages, so quite a bit longer than this. And reading that has been eye-opening, not just to learn about the evil that other people are capable of committing, but learning about the evil that you're capable of committing, and the evil that lurks inside yourself. Very, very important to read about stuff like that. So highly recommend this book. I read it when I was like 14, and I think all men should read it kind of in those formative years, teenage, early 20s. If you're in your 30s or 40s and you still haven't read this, make sure you go pick it up. Very important book. The next 2 books I would read together. These books pair well together. If you can read 2 books at a time, I would do that. I'd read both of these at the same time. If you can only really focus on one thing at a time, you like to finish one book, put it down, start another one, I totally understand that. I used to be like that. In that case, I would read these 2 books back to back, because it's important to compare and contrast them. The first one that I'm talking about is quite often regarded as the best book of all time. If you go on many, many lists, they'll have this as number 1 for good reason. It's George Orwell's 1984. This was written in 1948, and it details a totalitarianism dystopia that is a pretty accurate picture of what it was like to live in the Soviet Union and what it could be like to live today. There are definitely parallels that you can draw to life today from this book, and it's terrifying to read about it. Just a brilliant, brilliant dystopia novel, and a very heartbreaking story too. George Orwell's writing in this is terrific. It's about 300 pages, but once it gets going, it gets going. I mean, it's a real page turner. I read this, I think, when I was in grade 9 or 10, and it's one of those books that kind of opens your eyes to how the world really works. It's one of those wake-up books, like when you first watch The Matrix, very similar to when you read 1984 for the first time. You kind of see the strings that are pulling all the puppets, and I think that that's very important. Now, it's not the best dystopian novel, in my opinion. I think that there's one book that I'm about to talk about that does it a little bit better, and it's good to read it with 1984, and that's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, written around the same time. I think it was written about 4 years after, something like that. And this portrays a dystopian society that's totalitarian, but not as grim and dark and brutal as 1984. This is more happy and You know, all the people are taking this drug called Soma that makes all their problems go away and they just feel bliss. And it's almost like what these things do from time to time, you know? There's a lot of closer parallels you can draw between today's world and 1984. It's a much more accurate dystopian novel. While the writing's not as, I don't want to say it's not as good as George Orwell's. George Orwell tends to write characters a little bit better, I find, but Huxley's a little bit better at, you know, really thinking out the concepts, if that makes any sense. So these two books I'd pair together, read them together, think about which one do you think's more accurate, what do you think this one got wrong, what did this one get wrong, that sort of thing. So these books will open your eyes to how the world really works, and they're just a gateway into dystopian novels, one of my favorite genres. So two books that you absolutely must own and read. 1984 and Brave New World. Now, I'm getting into a couple books. These next two books are quite a bit longer. So take your time with them. Don't feel daunted by them too much. But this next book that I'm going to talk about, in my opinion, is the greatest book ever written. That's why it's on the list today. But it isn't very accessible. You need to memorize some Russian names, and they're long Russian names, and that's really the biggest barrier of entry. And it was written in the 1800s, so it's a little bit outdated in terms of style, and it's also 800 pages, but it is unmatched in its brilliance. I think every single chapter of this book is just a gold mine of diamonds. Like, there's gems and gems and gems in each chapter. I've reread chapters already going through it. I'm going to read this book many, many times throughout my life. I know that because there's no way I'm going to get it all on first or second or third read. I'm currently rereading it, and it's The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, I mentioned Crime and Punishment in the previous video being my personal favorite book of all time, and you know that story just resonates with me a bit more, but this is definitely the best book I've ever read in terms of just quality of writing. I could go on and on and on about it. I'll probably do an analysis video on it at some point when I finish my reread, but wow, is this book intense. And like I said, I would take your time with it. I would buy this book, I'd put it on your shelf, and I would just let it haunt you, let it taunt you. And eventually, when you pull it down off of the shelf, just read one chapter at a time. Take a whole year, take 2 years if you need, and just read it one chapter a night or one chapter a week, and just take your time to go through it. Don't try to rush it. Don't try to read it in a month. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think it's best to take your time with this book. And somebody once said that, you know, like if the religious text didn't exist, everything you need to know about in life is in The Brothers Karamazov. And I agree to that to a pretty healthy extent. There's a lot of life lessons in here that are very important. And it's brilliantly, brilliantly written. So yeah, that's my number 4. Number 1 is a book that's even longer, but it's really 3 books. Supposed to come out as 1 book, came out as 6, then it was put together into 3. It's a childhood book, I guess, for me. It's a book that I've reread many, many times. I've watched the films many, many times. The trilogy of films tends to be considered the greatest trilogy of films ever made. There's supposed to be 1 film. They were all shot together, so there's supposed to be 1 film, and if you consider it 1 film, I think it's pretty easy to make the case that it's the greatest film of all time, too. And I'm, of course, talking about J.R.R. Tolkien's brilliant Lord of the Rings. Now, I should probably have put in The Hobbit here because it's shorter. It came first. It's a little bit easier to read. But Lord of the Rings, I think everybody should own a copy of these books, and everybody should reread them many, many times throughout their lives, if you're capable of it. I will say they are, you know, written like almost 100 years ago, and a little bit dated. It's old, high fantasy, so it's not going to be for everybody. I know a lot of people have started these books and haven't been able to finish them. It's unfortunate. There's tons and tons of brilliance in these books. They're deeply Christian books too, which is interesting once you make that connection. And yeah, I have just an endless love for Lord of the Rings. I could talk about them all day. I'm going to make an analysis video on the movies soon. It's probably going to be like a 10-hour video. I'll split it up into multiple parts, obviously, but to take on the books, that will probably be like 20 hours. I just finished rereading them a couple months ago, and they're just as great as I remember them. They're incredibly, incredibly deep. And when you start to understand archetypes and the deeper meanings in Lord of the Rings, the brilliance of it is just really unrivaled. I don't think there's another IP that really comes close to how deep these books are. I love them, man. I love them. A lot of childhood memories with these books. So I would recommend every man go out there and buy a set of Lord of the Rings. You can get a nicer set than this. I have a nicer set coming in the mail soon. This was just the set that I grew up with. It's the movie themed set. But you can find some really, really nice copies of Lord of the Rings out there. There's one red book that has all 3 books in one, and it's like $300. I know most people aren't going to be buying that, but it is a beautiful book, and there are plenty of beautiful copies of Lord of the Rings out there. So if you're kind of an aesthetics person, you like nice looking books, Lord of the Rings is definitely up there. And yeah, those are 5 more books, I guess 8, because these are 3 books, so you guys got a little bit of a bonus there. 5 more books I think all men should own. I think you guys should have these books owned and on your shelf and reread them many, many times throughout your life. And I know I will as well. So yeah, that's my list for today. If you guys want to see another list like this, you guys want me to do 5 more and make the list 15, let me know. I'll keep making these videos. I think it's important to put the message out there for men to read more. You have guys like Andrew Tate and David Goggins and Joe Rogan out there telling men to lift, and that's important too. It's very important to stay in shape and to exercise every day, but it's equally as important to read books. If you want to be an expert in anything in life, doesn't matter what the subject is, the way to get there is to read books. Read books from other people who have thought about the subject, who have written down their ideas and their notes, and dive in, man. There are 500 million books out there. There's an endless amount, and there's books on every single subject. Whatever you're interested in, there's a book for you out there. So it's important to read. Yeah, I'm going to stop ranting for today and wrap the video up there. Thank you guys for watching. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps boost this channel in the algorithm. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and peace.